I really value discipline of like managing money, and a lot of early stage founders in Africa, they have to do that because you don't have a ton of money being thrown at you, right? And so being as frugal as possible uh, early on, until you know what every dollar you put in drives X growth or Y growth. We love it when founders talk to us when they're in building mode. I actually love it to engage with people when I'm not being pitched, or vice versa, in terms of, hey, this is what I'm building, and we're like excited to engage in the things that people are building. I think the second pivotal moment in my life was I was in the U.S. I studied at Harvard, got on a full scholarship there, then moved to the Bay Area to work in tech at an amazing early stage startup, and I was just in my zone. And I received a letter that my H-1B didn't go through. I had overstayed my stay and basically had to leave right away. And leaving the US and having that sort of also reality check of, this is a version of life that I had, but then reality decided something else for me. That was a very important moment. And I'm grateful that it happened to me, but in that moment it was very painful. And it changed the trajectory of my life in a significant way.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks, Ayu, for having me.
Absolutely. Our guest today is Yoseph Ayele, General Partner at Lava VC. And Lava is an operator-led venture fund investing in pre-seed to pre-series A company using Web3 and AI, to build better finance and trust in frontier markets. It's absolutely great to have you here. Now, thinking about those podcasts, right? If somebody is listening to this conversation from start to finish, what do you hope they'll walk away with?
I hope people will just think harder and deeper about what they want to build, why it matters to them, how they value their time and the energy, and just how to think better around the whole fundraising dance and capital dance that a lot of startup founders have to go through.
Amazing. Now let's get right into it, right? Let's say the human side of yourself. I really want to understand or get to know, who you are, what do you do, and what mission are you on?
So I'm Ethiopian, and I have spent still the majority of my life between Ethiopia, Tanzania, Kenya, a bit in your country, Nigeria, which I've really loved and enjoyed, and spent about the last 20 years in the US, New Zealand, different parts of Europe, and parts of Asia as well. So I feel very fortunate to have had a very multidimensional life, stepping in and out of different communities, different markets, different ecosystems. Just ways people approach life. I'm a product of the internet age. I learned most things online, learned to speak most of my English online. So I credit the internet for opening up information. But I've always been frustrated from my earlier days how opportunity in the global economy was very much gated based on your location. And when I grew up in Ethiopia, the best building we had was the airport, and the best road we had was the road to the airport, and the best building was the airport. And so what a lot of folks kind of aim towards is just how to get out of there as fast as possible. But I guess where I find truth now is some of the hardest and best opportunities exist in the African ecosystem and market. It is hard for a reason, but it is rewarding also because you're building infrastructure, you're building grounds people are working on, you're building train tracks for value to move around. And I'm meeting this parallels based on not just sort of like physical train tracks, but also like train tracks for value, for information, for money, for trust, for all types of ways. You're connecting a very disjointed continent and a whole set of markets and communities, and you're connecting the rest of the world as well. And so I find myself more and more attracted around that. I have spent a lot of time surrounded with, very luckily with just exceptional founders globally and people who are top of their game. And I have tried to learn one or two things from different people I respect. And I find great talent here in different parts of Africa. Where you are in Nigeria is sort of center of gravity of talent across Africa, in my view. I see a lot of talent in many different pockets of the continent, and so I've chosen the path of finding and supporting exceptional talent who inspire me, who inspire others, and who have a vision that is bold enough, that feels just a little unreachable, but executable enough in order to actually work towards it. And I like that sort of that middle ground and that beautiful space there. And so, the last several years have been focused on investing and deploying capital. I never thought I would do venture capital. I've always looked down upon many VCs, and I still try to walk people out of trying to get venture capital money if they can afford not to. But I chose this path because there's a very clear, unique role for capital to play in seeding and supporting companies that need to exist, founders that need to do what they need to do, and infrastructures that need to be built. And if we do those right, then the rest will work itself out. And so that's my philosophy and view in terms of what I do. Hope that gives you one nugget in terms of the person behind and the broader mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming from like the multi-dimensional background, having to live in different part of the world, access to different part of the world, and then that's sort of like shaping like your worldview, meeting exceptional founders, and now also like supporting those founders at the time. It brings me to like want to understand that all of this experience has shaped who you have now become, and sort of like your mission, right now. And so, having said that, right, many high performing people are driven by something deeper than ambition or like some of their experiences. Now, looking back, was there anything from your childhood or early life that has shaped like your hunger to succeed? Right.
Yeah, I feel I've been blessed with incredible parents who help me contextualize the world around me. And when I see things broken, my head is sort of what are solutions? And so a problem-solving mindset is something that I've really found myself leaning towards, and a huge part of it is based on upbringing. And you don't need money for that. You just need a good mindset for that. I think the other side is imagination, and that's something that I've also found crediting my parents, especially my mom, in a great way, because you always have to imagine 1 to 3 steps ahead of what is possible. And for that, you didn't need a lot of money or a lot of stuff, and we didn't have much of it. So I think those two things have been very much key parts of my earlier upbringing in life. And the last one is that, and that's something that I actually got a whole lot from the church I grew up in around, which is Nigerian. The Living Faith Church community when I was younger is that you're not a victim in this world, no matter whatever the world throws at you, right? So I felt those three beliefs very strongly throughout my life, in whatever context that you're in. And yeah, you are the main person who can best value your time, your energy, your attention. And the world knows how to orient around how you value your time, your energy, and your attention. And I believe that those are the most important things that we all can do that defines what we do, how we build, what we focus on, what we prioritize. And so those are things that I'm not perfect at, but I hold myself to a high standard and surround myself with people who also share sort of similar views in terms of, how they value the time, attention, and energy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. All of those traits or all of those experiences growing up, right? By any chance, I'm sure it has stayed with you even up till now. Do you want to describe yourself in like 3 words? Having said all of these things, the experience, the lessons learned, and all of those things, how would you encapsulate this in 3 words?
So hard. I'd say curiosity is definitely one that comes up. I struggle to put myself in a box, or I fight anyone trying to put me in any type of box, and so sort of that space of freedom. And freedom is, people have different interpretations for that, but I'd say freedom is another part, sort of to think clearly, openly. And last is just global. I feel like I've been blessed with so many lives compressed in one, with touch points around the world. So that's something else that is also a big anchor in my life.
Amazing. Curiosity, being global, and also like freedom to do whatever thing you want to do. You mentioned like you have major highlights in your life. So I want to sort of like repurpose the question into like, if you can share, what are 3 major pivotal moments, that has significantly changed like the trajectory of your life?
I'd say one is a lot younger on, when I was in high school and I thought I knew everything, and uh, and I thought I was able to get away with not doing what I needed to do. And my headmaster called me and he told me to my face, "Yosef, you are an arrogant prick." And he walked through all the things that I thought I was doing, and he burst my bubble of sense of self that I had. And that was really hard to hear because it burst all my bubbles. But I love it because that was a very important moment of changing my trajectory, of like pursuing truth and trying not to buy my own bullshit about myself and who I thought I was and what I thought I was doing. And I find it easy to keep falling that trap of believing my own bullshit and thinking of yourself in one way, but reality is actually different. And so I try to close that gap as much as possible. I think the second pivotal moment in my life was I was in the US. I studied at Harvard, got on a full scholarship there, then moved to the Bay Area to work in tech at an amazing early stage startup. And I was just in my zone, and I received a letter that my H-1B didn't go through. I had overstayed my stay and basically had to leave right away. And leaving the US and having that sort of also reality check of this is a version of life that I had, but then reality decided something else for me. That was a very important moment. And I'm grateful that it happened to me, but in that moment it was very painful. Um, and it changed the trajectory of my life in a significant way. And I'm really appreciative of why that happened, because it got me out of the rat race that many people find themselves in, and on a path that is truest to me, which is charting my own path and territory. Um, and I guess the third pivotal time in my life recently was nerding out in different Telegram groups and WhatsApp groups when I was living in New Zealand, working in something very different, connecting with a lot of students across Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, who were, this is back in 2020, I'd say, who were learning a whole lot more skills, capacities online by themselves without anyone handholding them, self-driven, and find themselves in very interesting pockets of the global crypto community, and like learning and being inspired by that human grit and that capacity to find the best things in this world, knowledge, growth, determination, in the least likely places, and like being inspired by people who were able to do so much more with the internet than what I could, when I was growing up in East Africa. That was extremely inspiring. That gave me sort of just a sneak preview of what is possible in unlocking talent when you create open knowledge base, when you create open economic infrastructure, when we lean more towards openness, what is possible, in unlocking the value of talent from wherever. And that window was very pivotal in getting me to reorient all my energy towards basically contributing to tech, to contributing to talent, to contributing to startups and here in the African market.
Thank you so much for sharing, those really, really inspiring moments. You mentioned one that sort of like piqued my interest, which is like unlocking talent, right? Which is what you have been doing, right? From especially with Borderless, then also Magma, and now Lava VC. Do you want to touch a little bit on that journey, right? Because I'm really, really curious sometimes as to the founders that I interview on the podcast, how they got to know about crypto first, and then the whole idea behind, Borderless, Magma, and now Lava.
So I started paying attention to crypto, first Bitcoin back in 2014. Many of my friends were getting involved in that space, mostly from investment landscape. And I think 2015, I read this article by, I think it was Ben Horowitz, who wrote how Bitcoin and blockchains can basically transform money movement across the world, and do micropayments, open up financial infrastructure to the world, and how it's basically designed for emerging markets. And that really planted a seed for me from, this just speculative financial thing to actually something that can build an entire financial system that is open. Back then it was still super early. So I've been keeping track and learning a lot about the technology, a lot about the different infrastructure that were happening. And then Ethereum came, and started learning actually about programmable money and a whole internet economy powered by blockchains, and then DeFi, and a lot of the different primitives that came along. But going down a lot of those rabbit holes, what became very clear is that at least in the early stages, a lot of the problems people were solving for, in terms of let's bank the unbanked, or open finance, or let's build like the world computer for all types of value transfer. Those are all incredible visions, but I found that the best product market fit for a lot of those primitives was actually here in Africa versus Europe or the United States. I think a lot of those markets are very sophisticated, and incumbents are well entrenched. And generally, a lot of those tools work for people today. It doesn't mean they're incentive aligned with the user's needs long term, but trying to disrupt that whole vertical from scratch was extremely hard looking at those markets. But when I look at a lot of African markets, the opportunity here is so clear to actually apply the primitives of those tools right now, today, in ways that actually solve problems at scale, for hundreds of millions of people. That was so much clearer and much closer to implementation than whatever ideas that people were pitching or philosophizing around in many parts of the world. And so that's kind of been a key element of that. The talent element became very clear when I started looking at how people were figuring out the way around decentralization, not just as a technology, but as community, as pockets of learning. And my initial inclination starting to get involved in this market was part just starting to invest in projects myself, but part also to figure out how to build for this vertical. And I wanted to build a startup, and I had a whole concept, and a lot of things developed, and people were like, great, we'll give you money to build that. But it became very clear to me that me trying to do that was more about doing it for me, as opposed to really looking at what needs to happen. And when I really zoomed out and became detached from, here's my idea, here I want to go build this, to what truly wants to happen in a lot of these markets, what I started paying attention to is whole pockets of really talented founders, not perfect, but had a lot of the core ingredients and deep, intimate understanding of the problems that they're actually trying to solve, versus someone just parachuting in and having philosophical views of what needs to happen. And capital was an unlock, was a need that was there. But it's not just like, I need money, give me money, but it is like, I need access. I need access to talent. I need access to capital, but I need access to growth and global infrastructure. And started really leaning into that problem area with Bordeless Africa, translating what I've been learning across these markets and ecosystems with the global crypto community, and also bringing parts of the global community here to spend time and really understand the opportunity, the challenges, the risk, the talent from first principles instead of just frameworks. And that translated to a month-long trip that I helped organize for Vitalik and the Ethereum Foundation leadership back in 2023, which then led to like a whole lot of other layer twos and many other infrastructure builders wanting to come and connect. And so just trying to build that bridge. And then we launched Magma as a kind of like accelerator meets founder residency, to help coordinate a lot of exceptional talent just to come together in person, learn from each other, find ways to collaborate, and really like figure out what needs to be built on the market. What are the problems people are solving across the continent, be it in Tanzania or Nigeria or Ghana or South Africa or many other countries, and just spend time 2 weeks with the smartest people who could find from across the African market. And I think that has been a really good foundation that inspired me to build Lava as a fund, which is actually let's have a structured vehicle through which we can invest and back a lot of founders that are coming through and give top tier global capital allocators and talent access to a lot of opportunities, but also patterns and learning and education of how this market is behaving. Because to realize a lot of the vision of either blockchain powered or frontier technology powered digital financial trust infrastructures across Africa needs a lot of capital, needs a lot more access and connection to the rest of the world. And so how do you unlock that is by basically getting decision makers to have a clear understanding of what the opportunity is. And fortunately and unfortunately, for a long time, a lot of investment here in Africa has been driven by sort of development finance institutions, more charity-led approach, which does what it does. But for me, the best unlock for value creation here is to actually get people who are at the leading edge of technology, who are the leading edge of investment, who are the leading edge of transformation around the world to participate, not just financially, but intellectually and practically. And so Lava is just one piece in unlocking that through capital, but capital as a context to increase the surface area of learning and connection into what's happening in the African market.
Yeah, really, really amazing. When you mentioned, you wanted to build like your own startup and then you had to like take a step back to sort of like understand the whole concept of what needs to be done in the continent. I think that blew my mind. So like it has been something you have been planning for like a very long time, with Borderless Africa, and then you went on, to Magma, and then, now Lava. I think that's like generational run. Trying to solve for talent, then access, also capital. You've mentioned in all of these things, right? You've mentioned like Africa like as the major piece, right? Now let's talk about Lava itself. Why are you actually betting, on products or like founders or like innovation, financial infrastructure coming out of Africa? Tell us like the origin story of Lava.
Yeah. Why I'm betting on the continent and the market is because I see a ton of opportunity for a lot that needs to be built from the ground up. And it's not easy. That's why many haven't done it yet, or have tried and haven't succeeded, or succeeded sort of to different levels, degrees. And I think it's a good window. It's a good time to do this. It's a good time to build in the market. And deep inside, I'm a builder first. And so Lava is a context through which to go find and be part of the journey of a lot of exceptional builders across the market. So we launched Lava 2+ years ago, as a fund, went and raised a small amount of money from just many people I respect and hold to a very high bar. And that also keeps us accountable, but also that opens up doors for us to do a good job, but for our founders to access quality around the world. The first person who wrote us a check was Fred Ursum, who co-founded Paradigm, and brought in a whole lot of other LPs. We used the fund vehicle as a means to collect relationships. And I think there's parallels to how startups or the early stage can think about fundraising is think of your cap table as a means of collecting the highest quality relationships that'll help you and support you. So we went around the world, and who are the people we respect the most, who are building in this space here, who want to have along the journey for the next 10 years. and who want to come along the journey of learning and can be a leverage point for us as we invest in the African market. I was very fortunate to have Andy Tedhope, who I think you should have a conversation with, to join Lava as our CTO. So for a while, it was him and I, and then built a small team around us. Xian Ha from Korea joined. Sung Lee has been very helpful from the early days. And then now we have Gurm and Ryan helping us on research and analysis. And so we're a very small, lean team. We love to eat our own dog food, meaning we use all the products we get involved in. We get really under the hood in terms of what people are building. I'm very like price sensitive because we've been investing in a lot of on and off ramps and orchestrators and stable coins. So I use all the things that we get involved in, and always have 1,000 pieces of feedback and things that can be improved, because that's just how I'm wired, and we get deep into the technology stack of what we do. And we diligence our companies very thoroughly, from the founder to the technology they're building to the market and problems that they're solving. We talk to many people, users, or understand how people are talking about it online, just to have a really rich understanding of what is it that moves you and why is this an important problem that's worth your time and energy to focus on this for at least a decade, because it takes a long time to build something great. Right. And so we do a lot of that, and we make an investment, but we spend a lot of the time telling many people why we're so bullish about that, why we're excited about that company, that founder. That includes our LPs, our investors, that includes many other funds that we talk to, just to help de-risk investment in the African market, to help bridge opportunity with where capital sits around the world. And we've made 18 investments so far over the last couple of years, and we're actively deploying capital at the early stages. We write anything between $50K to $500,000. We're not afraid to take bold bets. And yeah, we hope to be long-term partners with the companies that we back, and do justice by our investors as a fund. We write a lot, most times being quite critical of some of the things that we talk about in the market, or opportunities that we still haven't seen yet, or we're about to see, or even thoughts and ideas that we had a year ago that we disagree with today. And we use that as a knowledge base to research and find and seek truth, and to make it useful for companies who have backed, but many founders around the continent and ecosystem, to figure out what to work on, how to think about these problem areas, and to engage. We love it when people disagree with us, and get in a good dialogue, because we all learn from those types of engagements. So that's a little bit about sort of the Lava journey and where we're at today.
Thank you so much for going deep into like the origin story and why you're betting on Africa. You've talked a little or much more about founders, and how like you guys are excited to work with like founders. I'm sure like over the past years you must have met with really good and exceptional founders. Now I want you to walk us through like how you guys build conviction, right, before you sort of like invest, and then we'll talk about the good versus like the exceptional founders.
Yeah, all of that is very contextual based, so it's hard to overly generalize. But we basically try to understand as many parts of the business, the founder, the team, the dynamics, the market, the technology, the key things that we believe is important for that vision to come to life and realize itself. What is really needed, and we dive in. Some people are just building predominantly technology, and that's their core product, right? And so we dive really deep on that. Some people sort of regulation and knowing how to work with the old apparatus is the core moat. So we really dive in and try to understand that. Um, so yeah, we just get very intimate, get us under the hood as fast as possible, and that allows us to be adding value. So the feedback we get from a lot of companies that we evaluate is that we ask a lot of questions, and the founders who love nerding out on the things that they're excited about, like they enjoy that dialogue. And I think those who are just trying to get money out of us as soon as possible without, like, with the least amount of effort, find it a bit challenging to navigate that, because we get quite detailed around it, and we enjoy that because it feeds our curiosity and we learn so much about the business. But that's just the investment side, right? Then so much happens after you deploy capital in terms of how you build for those founders, how you support them, and it's not about being perfect. We never expect anyone to be perfect. So actually understanding where the gaps are and what risk we're underwriting is the critical element of it. So that's a bit of sort of how we approach it. And I think you asked a good question of, like, what separates a good founder from an exceptional founder. And I think one of the most important things is people who actually spend the time to really know what exactly they're building, why they're building it, what space that they're in, have a clear prioritization framework in their head in terms of what is important and what is less important, and who are executing. Like, exceptional founders are not bullshitting themselves. Exceptional founders are trying to find the path of least resistance to realize their vision and mission, and are not afraid to just let their ego out and say, great, I did this, I was wrong, I'm going to evolve and change and focus on this. And people who are committed to growth, and who are growing faster than their company. I hold a high conviction that as a founder, you need to grow a lot faster than your business. Otherwise, you'll become a liability for your business if your company is growing faster than you as the founder.
Do you want to shed more light on that, on as a founder growing more faster than the business?
Sure. I'll give you an example. And this kind of pulls a lot of context together. Different physical location and context, so please don't compare it. It's not apples to apples. But one of our LPs, and someone I highly respect, is Dylan Field. He founded Figma. I'm sure you have used Figma or know Figma. So he's one of our LPs, and I've gotten to know him over the last number of years. He was in San Francisco. He was in the center of technology and all of that. So very different context from someone trying to build a software business from Enugu or from Lagos, right? But he was a high school dropout. He didn't go to university. Like, his first job, I believe, was being an intern at LinkedIn. And people there saw potential in him. And over the last many, many, many years, he's basically had to learn not just how to build software, he was very smart around that, but how to hire talent, how to build more leverage with talent, right? How to survive as a business with a long-term vision. They were like loss-making for many, many years. They didn't have a clear product market fit, but he was very clear what North Star looked like, and there were many moments where he could have failed. And then scaled it to a level where he had to go hire now executives, which is very different than hiring early team members, right? And then push that product across the whole world, and then take it to IPO. It's like it's hard for anyone to just come in and do any one of those pieces. But if you look at someone who had just finished high school, and probably has felt, he's not qualified for each role that he's held across the whole journey, but he grew into that role, and he's always grown one step ahead. Again, not apples to apples, but I want to share just that mindset, right? That mindset that I gotta be growing 2-3 steps ahead, for me to be the best asset for the company that I'm building and to be able to drive this a lot faster. And the easiest trap for a lot of founders to fall into is to get into a lifestyle business, which is, oh, I'm just doing on and off ramp, right? And I've grown the business to this scale. I've got good revenue. I've got a car. I've got a nice house. I'm getting quite comfortable, and that's okay. Like if that's what you want, then don't go for a venture style business, right? Just run that company. Don't take anyone's money or like VC type of money, and live off revenue and profit. And I actually think that we should do more of those types of businesses in general because that is more sustainable. But if you're trying to come and build something exceptional and very scalable, then you got to be more than a Navy SEAL. You got to be really, really growing at a pace more than what you see around you. And for that requires imagination. For that requires a deep level of curiosity, ego out of the door, and prioritization of how to use your time to learn what, to build a lot of those muscles, and be surrounded with people who are always better than you at the things that you want to be good at, so that you can keep building a lot of those muscles.
Absolutely. I had to ask because I was trying to get the context to, what does it mean for a founder to grow faster than the business? And, you shared more light as to, with the example you gave, having to grow into certain roles that you yourself are not fit into, but you have to grow into it for the purpose of making sure the business survives and grows to the next stage. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope that somebody listening to this also, will catch that mindset also. Having said that, what disciplines and operating habits are most useful? Because sometimes most of the founders, I'm sure you've had conversation with most of these founders, and they're usually early stages. And so if you want to grow faster than your business, because that's what takes it to the next level, what are some disciplines, operating habits that are most useful for these early stage founders?
You got to be extremely comfortable with being wrong, and keep showing up after being wrong. So this one belief that I have is, on one side, as a founder, you're trying to convince the world what you see is so important and is worth your time and their time or their money. And on the other side, you got to be the biggest skeptic of everything you say and do. You got to look at what could I be missing? Where could I be wrong? And it's not just psychologically. Take that and just break it down. Great, let's go test it out. Let's push this out as quick as possible to see how the market takes it and behaves, right? And just the hardest part of being early stage founder is you're receiving so many different data points. Many people are telling you what to do, what's working, what's not working. So the hardest part for you is trying to prioritize what information to take seriously and what not to, who to trust, who not to trust, right? And that is really hard. And it requires you to be very clear and centered deep inside of you. Otherwise, you're going to be swayed left, right, center, kind of like a puppy, getting excited about everything, or jumping from one to the other. And so, yeah, I think those are really important disciplines. I really value discipline of managing money, and a lot of early stage founders in Africa, they have to do that because you don't have a ton of money being thrown at you, right? And so being as frugal as possible early on, until you know what every dollar you put in drives X growth or Y growth, right? When we talk about product market fit, to me, product market fit is, again, generalized, is basically building enough of a pattern to know that if I do X, Y will happen. And you have enough models from a lot of the experiments you have done to know how to use money effectively well to grow. Until that point, you're trying to figure out what is noise, what is signal. What is this customer telling me? What is this market telling me? What is this audience telling me, right? And because you love what you do so much, you wouldn't be doing it otherwise. You get so attached. And sometimes when something is not working, if you take 6 months longer to realize that, then you've wasted 6 months of your time and energy. You've wasted a lot of money. You've wasted a lot of momentum within your team, right? And so it's an internal psychology battle. And so that's what I keep coming back to, like, know who you are, know what you're doing, know what space you're in. And if there are many people who still don't know what's, like, they've built a lot of things, but still not as clear, what actually space am I operating in? And I think that's really important. And unless we know how to ask ourselves critically, we might just be running around in circles and doing that. So I think a lot of those disciplines are really good. And I think the other important thing is always try to attract people who are way better than you, like multiple levels better than you at all things that are needed. If you're the CEO, the founder, you're the smartest person in the room all the time, that's not a good sign, because you're not building leverage, you're building dependency. And you're not going to be able to move as fast, or you're not going to be able to execute as much as you want. So I think that is very clearly important. And I think the other last sort of lens I'd say is, especially when it comes to fundraising, to advisors, and a lot of people, like, my general advice is get folks, again, who you want to come along the journey, but who hopefully make it easier for you to keep scaling a certain function. And that could include fundraising. So who, having earlier on, allows you to attract more capital and keep bringing quality investors around the table, or who can help address and solve a certain problem at scale and make your life easier tomorrow. So you, again, building leverage. At every point, you got to keep building leverage of the things that you do. And many times we get, too caught up on, my company has to be X value or that value. It's every company's right and founder's right to figure that out. But sometimes people miss that element of it in terms of where North Star is. And so it's a delicate balance, because you don't want to be too diluted too early, but you also, you're going to attract quality people around you to support you along the journey. Otherwise, whatever number you put today is meaningless if the company is not somewhere great down the road, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Some of the things that I also, caught to myself is like getting comfortable with being wrong. That way it sort of like helps you like filter out certain things. You get to learn, and from like your learnings, you can get like the right headspace on where like you're actually going, what the North Star is. And the part of, getting people that are much more better than you, I think like that's an eye opener. You put it in certain way that says like, it sort of like fosters leverage rather than dependency. I think that's sort of like hits something, because of course, if you're the only one in the room that is sort of like good, everybody starts depending on you rather than you trying to like learn from other people. Thank you so much for sharing that. One of the things that you've also been mentioning is money, right? Probably like raising, spending it, or basically like using it as a leverage. Because you earlier mentioned that, especially for founders in Africa, right? There aren't a lot of funds coming in, and when you get it, you need to be able to spend it judiciously. So how should founders think about money, really?
Yeah, taking other people's money is a massive responsibility, energetically, psychologically, practically. Whether you know it or not, it's there. And I don't know how many great examples we've had in our ecosystems of folks who have been really good at taking money, using it well to grow and fully achieve their visions. And I think that's really important. So Um, yeah, like, first of all, this is just general life philosophy that I have is like try to do as many things that don't need money. um, right? There are things you can do without money that kind of like to go very far. Um, I believe that if you're building a company at early stage, everyone working, contributing to it meaningfully over a long period of time should have a part of the business where their upside from the success of that business should be significantly more than the entire salary package combined that they should have, right? And that should be very clear that we're all aligned, right? And if what you're building is actually exciting enough, and if you're a great leader, like try the best to convince people to come do things to contribute to the company and vision that you have without all of it being about money today, right? If I believe so much in what I'm doing, I should be able to sacrifice whatever lifestyle I thought I wanted to have and invest in this, right? And be mentally comfortable that even if it doesn't work, it would have all been worth it because I'd have learned a shit ton and I would have like experienced a whole lot of great things that I wouldn't have been able to do so. And it's great to have other people who also share a bit of that. Otherwise, if you're the only person taking that type of risk, but everyone else is just living on great salaries, then it's misaligned, right? So like, what are the things we can do without needing money just right now? One great lesson that I've learned from a very close founder friend who I worked with and for at some point is get money when you least need it. Don't go out fundraising, when you've got a short runway because you have the least amount of leverage as a founder, right? So you got to think around how to use money as energy to fuel your growth and to fuel the things that you need to fuel for. On one side, you can be very frugal until you know like how to best use that money. But when you found that, you should take risk. You should lean in. Otherwise, fate is not going to reward the ones that are just on the fence, counting pennies, right? And for a lot of startups, it's either all in or nothing. Of course, every context is very different. And then use money as context when you're raising money to bring people on board to your vision and your goal. For example, as an investor, if people just want my money and nothing else, there's some investments where we make like, okay, we can do that. But many of the times it's like work kind of add value practically, not just talking, right? Because a lot of talk of like value added and then not much happens, especially as a VC, and that's a very common thing. So try to focus on a lot of those things at the early stages. Further down the road, a lot of these dynamics change and evolve, and it becomes very much about the unit economics and the financials and the numbers. But I think those are like some of the ways that I think around money.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I'm sure someone watching this or listening to this would also like get like a lifetime thoughts or change of mind on how to sort of like approach. One of the things that you said is like be frugal when you're sort of like trying to figure things out, and then once you figure it out, just go all in, right? And just like you mentioned, sometimes like or most of the times is like all in or like you're holding back. Having said that, especially like for people raising from this part of the world, right? I'm sure you must have seen like highly connected founders and also like complete underdogs, right? What are some pros and cons to like each of these, and how does it affect like their success by any chance?
Yeah, very, very good point. And we talk a lot about this in our team. My natural bias is towards underdogs because I've been an underdog for a big part of my life, and I can viscerally connect with that energy of folks who have a lot to prove either to themselves or the world. But beyond just proving something, it is like you're going up against odds. They're not in your favor, and like there's that element. And then there are moments where actually having a whole lot of things work in your favor helps you, and it's actually needed to do that, right? We joke sometimes that many of the pitches that we get from different parts of the continent is like many people just pitch us relationship. Look who I have, my uncle, my cousin, my so and so, blah blah blah. Therefore, I'm set up for success. That is not enough. But if your business is trying to go lock in partnerships with 15 banks in the next year or 2 years, then the reality is, if you're in Nigeria, it's really hard to do that if you don't really have a lot of those relationships, or you don't have people in the team that have trust and relationships, right? But if that's not the case, if you're building something completely different, then you might have a different advantage. So knowing where your strengths are and how you use it, I think it's very important. And I believe the African market is one of the African markets are some of the places where you can do great things in both ways. And we're back to team members who are, either come from with a lot of context, privilege, networks, relationships, and those who, just are internet native and they learned everything in their room and figure stuff out from scratch and have built great things. But yeah, knowing what your strengths are, I think it's an important element there.
Yeah, knowing what your strengths are, right? So I want to understand like the part of the investment thesis for like Africa. What are you guys looking at by any chance? What are some solutions or like thesis or areas that you guys are looking to invest in? And do you want to share on that?
Yeah, we write a lot about this, but simple finance. So building core financial infrastructure stack that opens up the types of services that African users, businesses, institutions need to coordinate, to grow. And we've backed a whole lot of companies across that stack and different forms. You can find it on our website and a lot of our thinking. Second is we call it trust, where trust is broken or trust infrastructure is needed in order to reduce the amount of friction that exists for you and I to do business, whether we know each other or whether we don't, whether we're sitting in the same room or across the continent. How can we reduce frictions for value to move, for different types of business relationships to emerge? Everything from identity, from reputation, from credit scoring, from different types of automation. And my colleague Andy has written a beautiful piece around what is trust, and I think I highly recommend people to read that, because in crypto we focus so much on trustlessness. But I think in Lava, we look at actually trustworthiness. What makes this thing trustworthy? Right? And that reframes the whole framework. And we look at a lot of frontier technologies, including AI, energy, and many other verticals, not from a tech first, but how people are intentionally and very practically applying a lot of these tools towards large scalable problems that exist on the continent or in the specific markets that they're focused on. And all these things people can find on our website, where we dive right deep about it, and also in our research pages where we kind of break different parts and pieces with specific project contexts.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And like you mentioned, I just checked like the website. It says like simple finance, trust, and AI as leverage. So yeah, for as many persons watching, you can check out lavavc.io and you get all the details, right? it brings me to sort of like the next question, where like having said or having mentioned all of this, thesis or what you guys are looking at what stage should founders engage with Lava, right?
We love it when founders talk to us when they're in building mode. I actually love it to engage with people when I'm not being pitched, or vice versa. In terms of, hey, this is what I'm building, and we're like excited to engage in the things that people are building, and we can give feedback if we have anything of value to add, or keep track and tab and be of support to the founders. But I understand different founders sort of, they're all in, that I want to talk to any investor or anyone who's trying to give me money or take part of my business. But in general, we like to kind of engage with founders a lot earlier on as they're figuring stuff out. But yeah, a lot of founders talk to us when they're fundraising as well.
Okay, thank you. I guess the listeners have heard it all, especially like when you're in building mode, practically early stage, right? Now, having done all of this for the past 2 years, right? What are some like challenge, or what are the biggest challenges you've encountered while investing across Africa? Do you want to share some of the challenges?
Yeah, I think there's I think one big challenge is around how to position different companies right for global investors and global capital, because some companies just need so much more money than what Lava or other funds that they have immediately access to have. And so helping de-risk those opportunities or those markets for global investors is a big challenge. And like we have several of us fully dedicated to figuring that out or helping solve in bridging a lot of those bridges. Sort of another challenge is, when people are building things where what determines success is out of their control. And when you find someone like build a great thing, but the things that are actually critical is completely out of their control, and they have no say about that. For some, it can be regulation. For others, it can be for example, if someone is like reliant on a certain institution to do certain things, and they don't control that institution, then and like a lot of those challenges is sort of like where you interface new economy with old economy primitives. Like those tend to be more challenging, which is interesting, which is where like a lot of crypto is leaning towards right now in the stable coin, RWA, blah, blah set of things is actually leaning a lot more back into the old TradFi institutional direction, versus a lot of the core primitives that have existed. But that kind of like poses a lot of challenges. And yeah, just I think the last part is getting founders who are really in it for the right reasons, to zoom out and really understand the space that they're operating in. We turned down a lot of projects because some of the projects that people are pitching us to are either short-lived, meaning some of the things that we think are just commoditized or going to disappear or don't make sense. So yeah, we find ourselves in that type of position quite often.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think like the first one you mentioned, getting founders to have like access to like global capital, that's is really, really crucial. And also like those last part, which is you touched on it briefly, right? Prior to this conversation, where like getting founders who have like the right institution for, or like mindset for what they are doing. Basically, like I think on your website you call it something around intellectual honesty. If I'm correct. Yes, 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 yes. I guess that's what it means, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Thank you so much. What do you think about Africa like in the next 5 years, as we sort of like bring like the podcast to like a wrap?
I'm really excited about a lot of things that are happening here. I'm excited about the way people are using frontier technologies, be it blockchain or AI or any others, to um, solve for different areas of dysfunction that we have, but significantly with better primitives. For example, like the whole part of open markets. Many economies say they have open markets, but um, they're actually not as open internally. And some of the fundamentals of what people are building here are truly creating the level of openness that can have someone who's selling either chewing gum or cleaning shoes on the streets to like the biggest institutions, things that where it brings a lot of all these players to come, coordinate, participate, and be part of a thriving economy. I think those types of things are honestly generational and heavily consequential. And yeah, I get very excited about the problems people are solving for, and we see it right in front of us because the types of things people are building and where we're headed. And some of the world sees it, but I think a huge part of the world hasn't fully caught up to what is truly happening. And it's not linear. It's not sort of a very linear type of path. I think some of these primitives will have very transformational effect and impact in those markets, and those both like economic markets and financial markets across Africa.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joseph. You've come to the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing, your journey, insights, and also like thought process on helping founders, grow and scale from those part of the world, right? And so, if this conversation made you curious about what Joseph and the team are building, be sure to follow him on X and also check out Lava VC, especially if they are building really, really interesting products. And if you found this conversation valuable, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel for more conversations as this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks so much,
Bye.
Ayo.